What if Robert Baratheon didn't die? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. After his confrontation with Cersei in the Godswood, Ned is certain now more than ever that neither Joffrey nor his siblings are truly Robert's children. Yet he knows the evidence he has is circumstantial at best and would never definitively prove anything. There is only Renly, who Ned suspects has his ambitions, and Ser Barristan Selmy, but he is bound by his vows to the Kingsgurd. He realizes that if he is to have a chance, he will need more help. Taking a deep breath, he orders Littlefinger to visit him in the Tower of the Hand. Although he has his doubts about the Master of Coin, he cannot afford to lose him either.
My Lord Hand, to what do I owe this pleasure?
Lord Baelish, I find that I am short on men, and I require your assistance.
Paranoid, are you, Lord Stark?
Do I have reason to be?
In this city? Certainly. I can find you these men. There are sellswords plenty looking for services after the recent tourney. I'm sure I can find a few trustworthy ones to give you enough time.
It's not just swords I need. I require learned men. Those trained in healing, advising, and discretion. A maester.
He realizes that if Pycelle is Cersei's creature, he cannot be trusted for his treatment, or any treatment for that matter. He would need his maester in his household. Beyond that, he would need to ensure that none of their messages are interrupted.
I'm saying that Robert is out in the Kingswood hunting a boar, and I can provide you with more than a few mercenaries. I can put 100 swords in your hand, and you can take the Red Keep. When Robert gets back, we can spin whatever tale we wish. We can claim that they attempted to assassinate you.
I approached requesting help to ensure my safety, not take part in some coup. I will hear no more of this. I ask for additional guardsmen and a maester. Nothing more. I trust you can see this done.
Yes, Lord Hand.
Littlefinger bows stiffly before leaving. Once he is gone, Ned sinks back into his chair, but doesn't allow himself to rest. There is still more work to be done. He takes up a quill and parchment and begins writing to Stannis, telling him that he knows why he fled to Dragonstone, and that he shares Jon Arryn's suspicions. He urges Stannis to return to King's Landing to provide his support. Once the letter is completed, Ned has his guardsmen send it instead of a raven. Until he has his maester, he cannot trust Pycelle with any of his letters. Once he is gone, Ned leans back and tries to get some rest. For the next few days, he tries to pretend as if nothing had happened until he receives a discreet message from Littlefinger, who meets with him in one of the secret tunnels in the Red Keep. Ned is surprised by these tunnels and marvels at the sight.
These are just one of many tunnels that run across the castle, and one of the only ones I know of.
Knowledge like this makes it harder for a man to sleep at night.
Fortunately for you, I have a remedy that might help you sleep a bit easier.
From the shadows, nearly 20 men step forward. All of them are fierce and weathered, dressed in well-worn mail and bristling with weapons. Swords, dirks, axes, and spears. Sellswords. The last of them, though, is not a warrior. Instead, a small man in gray robes, with several chains looping around his neck.
I called in more than one favor to get these men here. I hope you use them wisely.
Thank you, Lord Baelish. This kindness won't be forgotten.
Eddard immediately takes the maester and most of the sellswords into his service, dressing them in his house's armor and adding them to his guard. The other 7 are scattered across the city gates and tasked with monitoring them for any signs of the king. However, Ned suspects that Littlefinger has these men under his payroll and assigns one of his guards for each sellsword. But as Eddard continues his duties, reports grow grimmer and grimmer. He receives word first that a group of brigands have been raiding the Riverlands and are rumored to be Gregor Clegane. Although he sends Beric Dondarrion to deal with him, part of him remains worried and wonders if this is a prelude to a larger invasion. After Catelyn's capture of Tyrion, it would be perfectly realistic to believe that Tywin Lannister would retaliate. Part of him wishes to mobilize a larger response, but until he has more proof of who these attackers are, he cannot risk escalating the conflict. Meanwhile, Cersei remains in the Red Keep and acts as if their conversation didn't happen. It soon becomes clear that she will not follow his demands. Ned must now plan how to deal with her. Beyond that, there is also the safety of his family as he tries to find a way to get them out of King's Landing and back to the north. These are the thoughts that keep him up at night, until he hears a knock on his door. A guardsman appears and bows his head.
Apologies, Lord Stark, but one of the men you sent out has returned with a report.
Sorry for the late hour, my lord, but I thought you'd like to hear this right away. I saw the king's party arriving in the Mudgate.
Indeed. What did you see?
Can't say who they were, but they all had a lordly look about them. At least a dozen of them. Most of them grown men. One big bastard, though, had a burnt face under his dog helm. He was riding alongside some golden-haired boy, but there was a litter with them. I couldn't see who was in it.
Eddard's eyes widen as a sense of foreboding washes over him. Something terrible has happened, and he can feel it in his gut. Quickly thanking the man for his report, Eddard has his guards and maester assembled. He sends some guards ahead to the Red Keep gates, while he hobbles after them. By the time he dons his clothes and hobbles down the steps, one of the guards runs back and informs him that it is indeed the royal party, and they are making their way to the Maegor's Holdfast. Eddard orders the maester with him as they wait until the party disappears into the keep before joining them. Although surprised to see the Hand awake at this hour, no one is in a position to stop him as he enters the king's chamber. Robert Baratheon breathes heavily on his bed. The sheets are stained with blood that seeped through his bandages. Each movement, even just breathing, sends another wave of agony across his body. When Ned lifts his sheets, he can see just how badly the boar gored him. The blow went deep, and they will need to act fast. The maester quickly gets to work, starting to clean the wound while handing him milk of the poppy to dull the pain. Despite that, Robert manages to smile.
Ned, you look like a worried mother. You know this is the first time I've bled.
And you look like a fool who decided to wrestle a boar. My maester is here to tend to you. Your wounds are more serious than you realize.
Robert grunts, but allows the man to work. Footsteps echo in the hall, and Cersei sweeps into the room, her eyes narrowing as she spots Eddard and the Stark maester tending to her husband. Pycelle shuffles in behind her, his hands folded.
Lord Hand, it's late. I trust you can explain why you're here, especially with your maester.
King Robert's wounds needed tending.
My maester was closest.
I shall take over, Lord Stark. With all due respect, the Grand Maester must tend to the royal family. The king requires a more practiced hand.
My maester has already started his work. Stopping now could make matters worse.
Lord Stark, I don't believe it's your place to decide who treats the king. My lord, you need your strength. The boar nearly took your life. Think of the kingdom, the children. Please, let Pycelle take over.
Enough. The lot of you. Stark's men stays. Pycelle, you can advise them, but don't hover over me like a damned vulture. The boar didn't kill me, woman. Ned will see I'll live to drink another day.
Cersei's eyes flash with frustration, but she holds her tongue, her gaze flicking toward Pycelle, who frowns but nods stiffly. The queen soon departs, leaving them alone. The Stark maester continues his work, applying a fresh poultice to the wound and whispering quiet reassurances to Robert, whose grunts of pain soften slightly. Eddard keeps a steady hand on Robert's shoulder, his face tense as his friend's pallor grows. Seeing the situation ease, Ned takes his leave, but continues to visit Robert every day when not busy with his duties. He gives regular reports on the happenings around the Seven Kingdoms and inquires about Robert's health. For a while, it seems as if the king's days are numbered, as his face remains ashen and he can barely stand, with even small movements being painful. Ned stays by his side, offering silent prayers to the old gods, knowing that the fate of the realm depends on Robert's survival. But soon, things begin to look up, as the maester's consistent care begins to improve Robert's condition. He eventually can sit up, and there's less pain in his face. One day, Ned even enters to the sound of Robert laughing as he flirts with a servant girl serving him wine.
It seems the king's recovering well.
Thank the gods for that Meister of yours. And his soft touch. Now, if only he were a woman.
It's good to have you back, Robert. The realm needs you. I need you.
You would have ruled just fine without me.
I wasn't talking about as a king.
Someone needs to remind you how to laugh, Ned. Truth be told, sometimes I forget myself.
The Iron Throne is a great responsibility. They never taught us that in the war.
I used to think fighting was the hardest part. But sitting on that damned chair every day, listening to every fishmonger complain and lordling asking for something, it's enough to drive a man insane. Sometimes I lose myself to that throne. When that boar ran me through, I felt more alive than I did in 15 years on that thing.
Robert, you were right about that Targaryen girl, Ned. Killing her would have been a mistake.
Spread the word. Whoever tries to take her head will lose his. That should scare off the assassins.
And if it were your own children, Robert, would the decision be any different?
What are you talking about?
Ned hesitates, but his gaze is steady.
Cersei and Jaime. The children aren't yours, Robert.
There's a moment of stunned silence as Robert stares at Ned, disbelief and anger flickering across his face. But Ned takes a deep breath and recounts everything. Jon Arryn's death, his own investigation, and Cersei's confession in the Godswood. With a roar, he throws his goblet against the wall, shattering it. He sits up, but ends up grimacing. However, he refuses to lean back. But just as quickly, the anger disappears, replaced by anguish.
How could this happen? How long have I been blind?
You did the best you could.
Damn it, Ned. I didn't bring you here to have another flatterer.
You allowed it to thrive. I did my best to warn you, as did Jon Arryn and your brother Stannis.
Damn you, Stark. Damn you and your honesty. I thrive and fester. Sometimes I think I should have let Tywin Lannister take the throne. Just gave him what he wanted.
A miserable notion, Robert. The realm would suffer more than you can imagine under Lannister rule.
So what then, Ned? What solution do you have?
We can't let the Lannisters remain unchecked. Arrest Cersei.
She won't go quietly. Nor will Tywin take it lying down. Especially after what you told me in the Mummer's Ford.
We'll have to act swiftly. You'll need to be ready, Robert.
If I'm to keep my throne, I'll have to fight for it. But by the gods, Ned, I can't do it alone.
The next day, the throne room is packed, the tension thick as Ned Stark strides through the hall, his guards and sellswords flanking him. The crowd murmurs in confusion and anticipation, wondering why they were called here by the Hand. Near the Iron Throne, Cersei sits proudly with Joffrey seated on the throne, their cold, triumphant gazes fixed on Ned. Around them, Lannister guardsmen and Kingsgurd stand ready, with the gold cloaks lining the hall, giving Ned a grim sense of how outnumbered he is.
By decree of King Robert Baratheon, I have been named regent in the event of his death or incapacitation until such that his heir, Stannis Baratheon, can claim his rightful seat. This was the king's will, written by his own hand.
Cersei's lips curl into a scornful smile as she rises to address him.
The king's will, or the words planted in his mind by a northern maester while he lay on his deathbed, poisoned by pain.
I witnessed the king's return, Lord Stark, and I can tell you he was in no state to make such a decision. He was fevered, babbling.
Murmurs ripple through the court as Cersei raises her hand, her voice taking on a steely edge.
Stand down, Lord Stark. You were brought here as my husband's friend, yet you conspire to steal his crown. You disgrace him with this treachery. The Lannisters do not suffer betrayals lightly.
Her guards shift forward, hands on their swords. Ned's own guards ring around him, prepared to fight to the death to protect their master. A tense silence follows, everyone waiting for the next move. The two sides inch closer together, but before anyone can strike, a booming voice echoes through the hall.
Enough! Stop this madness in the name of the king!
All heads turn to see Robert himself striding through the hall, leaning on his warhammer, but with fire in his eyes. The murmurs of the courtiers run in shock and confusion as he steps forward, his presence cutting through the room like a blade.
Robert!
You would raise your swords against my hand? Against a man acting under my orders? I am ashamed of having such men as my protectors, and I am ashamed of myself for being so blind to see it. But I see now. Now throw that steel down, or those white cloaks won't be the only things you lose.
The Kingsgurd shift uncomfortably, lowering their weapons, their loyalty suddenly uncertain under their king's withering glare. The Lannister guardsmen and the gold cloaks do the same. Only the Hound remains with his sword ready.
And you, dog. Will I need to chastise you?
Long live the king.
He lets his sword drop to the ground as Robert advances onto the throne, glaring down at Joffrey.
You're on my seat, boy.
Joffrey trembles and quickly scurries away, allowing Robert to lean back against the Iron Throne.
This is my shame. I let myself grow weak and soft. And this court has grown full of schemers and flatterers. And as for you, wife, I've turned a blind eye for too long. Ser Barristan, I know you is the best amongst the Kingsgurd. Poor crop they may be. Take her and the children into custody. And you, Joffrey, I will see you disciplined yet.
With Cersei and the children removed, Robert lowers himself onto the Iron Throne, though pain flickers across his face. He looks out over his court.
This court will know one thing from now on. The Iron Throne belongs to the king alone. Any who place their ambition above the realms will face justice.
The hall is silent, each face a mixture of shock, fear, or relief, as Robert settles back, his fingers gripping the armrests of the Iron Throne. For the first time in many years, he truly looks like a king, standing tall and proud. He glances at Ned, giving a brief nod, which he returns. As the last of the Lannisters are led away, it comes time to address more pressing matters. Renly brings ill news, as there is now open war in the Riverlands. What started as raids turned out to be just a prelude to a full-scale invasion, with Jaime leading a host to besiege Riverrun and Tywin making his way up north to claim every castle in town. Not all news is grim, though, as there are also reports of Northmen gathering at the Neck to face them. But they cannot do it alone. Robert decides to confront the Lannisters too, gathering an army from the Crownlands and the Stormlands and riding out to face them. Ned, meanwhile, is ordered to hold King's Landing until Stannis arrives.
Are you sure that's wise, Your Grace? Ned, I may not have much skill in ruling, but I know how to win a war. Don't worry, I won't try anything foolish.
A few days after the king departs, accompanied by a few hand-picked knights, reports come in of a large fleet approaching King's Landing, with Stannis at their head. Ned decides to meet Stannis face to face. The sound of waves crashing against the hull fills the air as Ned strides up the gangplank to meet Stannis on the deck of his flagship. The two men stand face to face.
So, my brother reached all the way to the north for his hand instead of summoning his brother. You would have been a fool to accept such an offer. I know you fear for your life, rightly so. You were right, Stannis, about Cersei and the children. They are not Robert's blood.
Stannis' face tightens, though he tries to hide his satisfaction.
Treason of the highest order, then. I know my brother couldn't have learned that one on his own. And what do you intend to do now that the truth is known? Serve the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Serve you, Stannis.
For a brief moment, a flicker of surprise crosses Stannis' face, but he quickly hides it and bows his head.
I expected no less from you, Stark. Thank you. Robert wouldn't have made this decision on his own. He would have sooner named you heir than me. He's always had a soft spot for you.
He may be soft, but he knows loyalty. He knows justice, and justice demands that you are his heir.
So, where is the king now?
Where else? In the front.
What else did I expect? He rides off to get all the glory while we remain here to do all the hard work. All right then. I suppose we should begin cleaning the house, starting with the traitors.
Meanwhile, in the southern fields near Riverrun, Tywin Lannister is seated in his command tent, discussing his next moves with his bannermen, just as a scout bursts in.
My lord, the Baratheon banners have been sighted on the horizon, 8,000 strong and bearing the crowned stag banner.
He glances around the tent, noting the subtle expressions of uncertainty on the faces of some of his bannermen. It was one thing to go to war in the Riverlands, but to strike at the king's own troops, that was treason.
So, my good brother has come for his crown. Very well. We will meet him with diplomacy. Order the men to make camp here. We will send an envoy to the king.
The bannermen exchange wary glances, but are happy to hear they will not fight, dispersing to relay the orders. Once the tent is nearly empty, Tywin signals to Gregor Clegane, Amory Lorch, and Vargo Hoat, who remain behind.
You three gather a company of picked men. I want no Lannister banners, no sigils. When night falls, strike at the Baratheon forces. Kill as many as you can and send the rest scattering.
Gregor Clegane grins wickedly, while Amory Lorch and Vargo Hoat exchange knowing looks.
There must be no chance of this treachery falling back to us. Take your best and bring me Robert's head.
Robert Baratheon's forces are assembled in a loose formation, preparing to break camp. Sandor Clegane and Barristan Selmy stand nearby, weapons ready while Robert inspects his warhammer, testing its weight. The calm morning air is shattered as shouts of warning echoes across the camp. Tywin's picked men, led by Gregor Clegane, Amory Lorch, and Vargo Hoat, descend on the camp. Gregor's weight allows him to smash through the feeble defenses, throwing aside men with his greatsword, while behind him, the Mountain's men and brave companions cut through tents and soldiers alike. The Baratheon troops scramble to form lines, but the attackers strike fast and viciously. Robert lets out a roar, raising his warhammer and charging toward the fray.
To me! Rally to your king!
The Baratheon forces, bolstered by Robert's presence and Barristan's discipline, begin to rally. They secure the king's tent and slowly begin to push forward, expanding their area of control as the Lannisters' men lose their momentum. While they press forward, Robert is in the front, roaring and swinging his hammer, crushing anyone foolish enough to get in his path. They come across Ares Oakhart, who cuts down Amory Lorch with a small group of men and rushes to join him. More of Tywin's forces begin to falter, witnessing the king's wrath. Gregor Clegane, seeing his men routing, orders a retreat and rides out the same way he came. Robert chases down the retreating men until they scatter into the woods. Once they are gone, they turn to the Lannister camp.
Treason! Tywin Lannister sent you lot to kill me.
Lay down your arms or taste
My hammer!
He catches sight of Tywin's many remaining bannermen lowering their weapons, some dropping them all together in surrender. The surrender spreads quickly as more Western men cast down their weapons. Robert's men take stock of the battlefield, strewn with fallen soldiers from both sides.
The field is yours, your grace. What shall we do with the prisoners?
Bind them. They'll answer for their crimes. And Tywin will be brought to me in chains.
As the sun rises higher, the field is littered with Lannister banners, the loyal Baratheon men standing victorious around their king. The few remaining traitors kneel before him, awaiting their fate. For his crimes, Tywin is executed, along with Kevin, Cersei, and his leading bannermen. Jaime, meanwhile, is executed by Robb Stark under orders of Robert Baratheon. Casterly Rock is placed under the stewardship of Stannis, who is tasked with keeping the western lands under control. Tyrion disappeared after the battle, and is rumored to have escaped with his clansmen to the Mountain of the Moon. The Hound is tasked with rooting them out after he's done chasing off and dealing with the Mountain. Meanwhile, Joffrey and his siblings are spared execution, thanks to the intervention of Ned. Instead, Joffrey is sent to the north as a hostage. Myrcella will remain in the King's Landing, and Tommen will accompany Stannis to the Westerlands. If they prove to be loyal servants of the crown, they shall be granted Castle Rock. Renly, meanwhile, arranges a marriage alliance with the Tyrells to keep them loyal, with Margaery marrying Robert and Garland marrying Sansa. With his near brush with death, Robert takes his duties far more seriously, and with Ned as his hand, the two guide the realm into a new period of prosperity.
The marriage ceremony between Robert and Margaery takes place several months after the war in the Riverlands. Lords and ladies from all across the Seven Kingdoms, even those who joined Tywin, are invited to participate as a gesture of goodwill. In that time, the realm has begun to heal from this short but violent war, thanks in large part to Ned Stark. But part of the credit also goes to Robert. His near brush with death awakened something in the Baratheon king, an old fire that many thought was long gone. For the first time in his life, Robert truly begins acting like a king. He moderates his drinking and spending while spending more time attending small council meetings. The first thing he does is remove Varys the Spider, Grand Maester Pycelle, Sir Meryn Trant, Sir Boros Blunt, Sir Preston Greenfield, and many other courtiers. Even his brother Renly Baratheon loses his seat after abandoning Ned Stark, though he is allowed to keep Storm's End. Together, Ned and Robb begin finding replacements for these positions. One of the first names on their list is Loras Tyrell, who is given a position in the Kingsgurd. This is done to further strengthen the burgeoning alliance between the Crown and the Tyrells. The marriage between Margaery and Robert helps bring them together, but they do not stop there. Robert also begins repairing the relationship with Dorne by sending them the heads of Tywin Lannister and the Mountain after he's found. One of his biggest challenges is repairing the Riverlands from this war. Huge sums of money are spent to rebuild ruined villages and castles. This rebuilding and Ned's pardon ensures Robert also maintains the loyalty of the North and the Riverlands. Meanwhile, Stannis and Renly holding the Westerlands keep them in line. This ensures Balon Greyjoy doesn't attempt his rebellion. The only place that remains uncertain is the Vale, which continues to be ruled by Lysa Arryn and gives little contact with the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. But barring these local threats, like Tyrion's mountain clans, the Seven Kingdoms are at peace, and allow the new small council to address their enormous debt. Tywin's debts are considered invalid, leaving only the Iron Bank and the Faith, forcing Robert to cut down on his lavish lifestyle. To make matters worse, they lose Littlefinger as well. Though his assistance of Ned Stark spares him from removal, he voluntarily steps down.
My lords, I regret to inform you that I feel the need to resign from my position. Though I am grateful for the honor you've given me to serve as Master of Coin, I believe it is high time I return to the Vale.
The Vale? Now? With all Mountain's clansmen running amok, and Mad Lysa doing seven knows what?
It hardly seems like the teat you'd be running to, Lord Baelish. Our king has such a way with words, but that is precisely why I feel the call of home. I must do my part to ensure the king's peace in the Vale. While I am no great warrior or commander, I have long been friends with Lady Arryn, and hopefully I may advise her. That is, with your permission.
That wit of yours will be sorely missed here, Littlefinger. That and your magic with money. But I will not stop you. Go then, and I wish you great luck with that woman. And be careful, Lord Peter. The high roads are dangerous now, and I know the Imp has no love for you.
Your concern is appreciated, Lord Stark, but I've survived far worse than the dwarf.
When Robert isn't handling matters of the ruling, he is using his new free time, not drinking or whoring, to train in the yard. It has been many years since he had begun training, but the recent excitement was an eye-opener for him. The first was his recent battle against Tywin. Although a success and victory for him, Robert could feel the difference in his strength compared to his rebellion. The other is his marriage to Margaery Tyrell. With the queen so much younger than him and surrounded by her gallant-looking brothers, Robert is actually aware of how different he must appear to them. Older, fatter, drunker, closer to her oafish father. While Margaery doesn't say anything, he can sense the judgment in her and vows to become strong. He tasks this job to Barristan Selmy, who is ordered not to hold back in their sparring sessions. The legendary knight is true to his word and repeatedly humbles Robert, but this only pushes the king harder to meet his challenge. However, this peace is shattered by the anvil of the Night's Watch representative. Sir Alliser bears the hand of a dead ranger and warning of the others. At first, Robert is in disbelief, but Ned takes these threats seriously, especially as his brother disappears beyond the wall and urges him to send troops. For a start, they empty the dungeons and have all the men sent to the wall, but these only number a few dozen. Robert orders that some of the houses that sided with House Lannister provide some men as punishment for the wall. The North also volunteers men, and the Riverlands, as many men lost everything, and the wall will at least provide them with shelter and companionship. They managed to scrape up a force of about 2,500 men, who march to the wall, and not a moment too soon. An army soon arrives on the wall. Not the hordes of whites that Alliser warned about, but wildlings led by Mance Rayder. With the extra reinforcements, they find all castles garrisoned and ready. The battle is one-sided, as the wildling forces are smashed, allowing the victorious Night's Watch to dictate the terms. Many are happy to simply let the wildlings starve beyond the wall, but Jon Snow abdicates letting them in. He suggests that they be forced to yield their weapons, and add their numbers to the Night's Watch and settle in the new gift. But this is just the start of their problems. The recent wildling incursion only confirms the presence of the White Walkers, as wildlings verify this report, and survivors of the Great Raging report being attacked by them. News soon reaches the court, and the mood changes instantly. From the laughter and mockery that hamper Allister's early visit, many now realize how serious the situation is. Ned takes command of these affairs as Warden of the North. But as their gaze turns north, trouble begins to brew in the east as rumors abound of the mysterious Daenerys Targaryen. There are reports of her summoning dragons, of her taking control of Slaver's Bay, and now they claim she plans on turning her army west to the Seven Kingdoms to reclaim the Iron Throne. The mention of the Targaryen name sends Robert's blood boiling. One thing that hasn't changed from the days of his youth is his hatred for that family. Suddenly, Robert seems like he's 20 years younger, as he begins planning for her arrival with new energy. Taking only a small group of trusted men, he rides across the land. The years of training have done their part, as he loses much of his excess weight and shaves his beard, looking closer to the mighty hero he was during the rebellion. Meanwhile, he's accompanied by his beautiful wife and her gallant brother, alongside Barristan the Bold. This makes for an inspiring sight for commoners and nobles alike. Coupled with his natural charisma, Robert can bring most of the realm together. Most, but not all, as some remain distrustful of him. In the south, Renly never fully forgave Robert for removing him as Master of Law, especially after he secured the marriage between him and Margaery. Though he never shows it, he secretly seethes and waits for an opportunity to strike. The same is true for Littlefinger, who still hasn't forgotten about his ambitions to the throne, and has spent these years consolidating his hold over the Vale. While the lords distract him, his position as Lysa's husband ensures that he cannot be actively threatened. When they hear of the Dragon Queen's rise, both secretly send messengers to treat with her, offering their aid. They are soon joined by a second ally, the Golden Company led by Jon Connington and young Griff. At first, Daenerys is skeptical, but the promise of the Golden Company convinces her, and they soon set sail. But as they reach the narrow sea, the fleet splits into two. The Golden Company sails toward the Stormlands, where Renly promises them easy passage. Tarth is the first to fall, as Renly already storms it with his men and allows the Golden Company to begin landing on the mainland. However, ships from House Seaworth slip past and inform the capital. Soon the royal fleet arrives to challenge this land. Outnumbered nearly 10 to 1, the Golden Company ships stand no chance. But as the royal fleet approaches, a roar echoes from the Straits of Tarth. From the woods, a trio of shapes takes flight, their wings darkening the sky as Daenerys' dragons loom overhead. All three hovering over the ships, dodging crossbow bolts and arrows as they counter with fire. Pillars of flame erupt forward, burning the first rank of war galleys and sending the rest into a panic. Ships desperately try to escape the inferno by turning around and running. These crash into each other, making it impossible to maneuver. Dozens of warships go up in flames, as through the burning wreckage, the Golden Company sails for the mainland. Those ships that do escape find themselves harried by ships loyal to Renly Baratheon. When at last the Golden Company makes landfall in the Stormlands, they find Storm's End's gates wide open. Hearing this, Robert is furious and begins mobilizing his army to confront them. He rushes south to confront them along with the Tyrells and Martells, who are also assembling their host. However, with their royal fleet in disarray, this leaves the second fleet to land almost unopposed in the Vale of Arryn. The city of Gulltown is unprepared, as the first ships emerge from the mist. The guards barely have the chance to raise the alarm before the freedmen and sellswords leap down their ships, followed closely by the Unsullied. They rush through the streets, and although the City Watch and whatever soldiers remain in the city put up a good fight, they are badly outmatched, and most are either killed or forced to surrender. Houses Grafton and Arryn of Gulltown both are defeated and forced to surrender to Daario, whose golden tooth flashes as he smiles.
Hardly worth my time. I hope the other lords of the Vale will be more entertaining.
As the smoke of Gulltown's defeat rises in the air, reports circulate of the Vale with their lords all rushing to mobilize their armies. Some rush to retake Gulltown, while others move to block passes or defend their lands. But Littlefinger proves his worth once again. He sends false reports of their locations, numbers, and plans. Vale men march through the empty battlefields, rush to defend unimportant locations, or are simply too intimidated to leave their castles. Some even join their forces with advancing Targaryen forces. The few forces they face are easily swept aside, allowing the Unsullied and the Sellswords to make a lightning charge across the Vale until they reach the Bloody Gates. Thanks to Littlefinger's efforts, most of its garrison and supplies are gone when the Unsullied arrive. To their surprise, the defenders are ordered by Lysa Arryn to simply let them pass. Littlefinger simply whispers to her ear, saying that once they are through, it shall be the remaining 6 kingdoms' problems. The only real challenge they face is Tyrion. Thousands of clansmen descend the mountain to raid them, but they are not strong enough to stop the Unsullied who reach the lowlands. Once in the Riverlands, their forces spread out and begin their campaign. The Unsullied move through the Riverlands, their disciplined formation striking fear into the heart of the Rivermen. Sellswords and freedmen ride ahead, capturing fjords and crossing for them to pass, but facing stiff resistance from the Riverlords. They initially try to group up and face them head-to-head, but even their much-vaunted knights are no match for the disciplined ranks of the Unsullied, or the relentless fury of the Sellswords and freedmen. The Knights of the Vale who do ride with them only add to the chaos, scattering their forces. This leaves the Riverlords to switch tactics, instead using the rivers to their advantage, blocking off choke points and launching hit and run before using barges to disappear. This harries them across the region, with the Riverlords using the superior knowledge of their surroundings to terrorize the Targaryen forces. But their efforts soon pay off, as soon after, Stannis departs from the Westerlands, leading a large host that is further stiffened by a small contingent of Northmen sent by Ned, who is still organizing the wall's defense. Unlike the reckless early attacks made by the hot-headed Riverlords, Stannis approaches this with cool discipline. They strike first at the Fair Market, where Grey Worm attempts to break through their defenses, but while the Unsullied manage to march inside, the Westerosi soldiers break their ranks, turning it into a melee where the knights have the advantage and force the Unsullied to break off. Meanwhile, hand-picked warriors like Mark Piper, Lord Vance, and the Blackfish lead raids across the Targaryen support lines, while Stannis constantly shadows their forces, waiting for the opportunity to strike and deny them favorable terrain. But while Grey Worm has discipline, Daario Naharis has creativity, launching night raids and ambushes that hamper Stannis' war effort. With their path to Riverrun blocked, Grey Worm turns the army south to Harrenhal. Here they have more success, with House Wentso depleted. But as the castle falls, Stannis turns his host south to confront them. He sends out Adam Marbrand with a large force of cavalry and sweeps into their wings. This time, the outnumbered Knights of the Vale are unable to halt their attack. Their breaking doesn't allow the Unsullied to form up, and they are forced to retreat inside the castle, leaving Stannis to lay siege to the ancient castle. Meanwhile, further south, the Golden Company fortifies their position at Storm's End, bolstered by rebel Stormlands who have rallied to their cause. The banners of the Griffin and the Stag fly side by side, as Jon Connington and Renly Baratheon join their armies. But the force they face is larger than the force they fought in the Trident. Men from the Crownlands stiffened by loyalist Stormlands, spears from Dorne, and the cavalry of the Reach, all led by Robert himself, whose fury knows no bounds after hearing of his brother's betrayal. The first major engagement erupts at Summerhall, where the combined forces of the Tyrells and Dornish clash with the Golden Company in a bloody melee. The Dornish spearmen face off against the disciplined phalanxes of the Golden Company, while Tyrell knights attempt to outflank the mercenaries with their cavalry. Against lesser foes, this would have been a sound strategy, but the Golden Company do not break, and Renly's Stormlords fight with zeal, their knowledge of the terrain, choosing ground favorably to their environment. Despite their valor, the Loyalist forces suffer heavy losses, especially when the Golden Company brings in their war elephants, which smash through the Dornish and Reach center. The flanks try to envelop them, but the right flank goes up in flames as Daenerys' dragons descend on them. This is just as Robert's forces arrive. He rallies the remainder of the army and organizes a counterattack as they advance towards Blackhaven. This time, he leads his forces from the center, blocking their advance and striking hard into their forces. The king looks like a hero from a fairy tale, his antlered helmet making him appear like a giant, while his sword slices through foes like carving a cake. As the elephants advance, the Dornishmen launch a feigned retreat, dropping caltrops and spikes as they run, causing the elephants to rear up in pain, momentarily paralyzed and allowing them to target their handlers. Meanwhile, the Reach forces led by Randyll Tarly press the Golden Company hard, but suddenly the dragons descend and the center goes up in flames, their shadows consuming the walls of Blackhaven as they see the distinctive shape of Robert's armor. They open their mouths to fire again, but suddenly Viserion screams in pain as he goes low, and a baseline bolt strikes him across the neck, causing his fire to shoot out wildly. Instead of striking Robert directly, it throws him off his horse and sends him crashing to the ground. Viserion tumbles a short distance away. Jon Connington rushes through with his men, spotting Robert Baratheon's body amidst the dead, half burnt with his armor dented at the stomach from a mace. But as they remove his helmet, they are shocked to see the face underneath is none other than Beric Dondarrion. Suddenly his eyes open, and a pained smile fills his face.
What? Who better to be a king's body double than a man who can't die?
He suddenly seizes his dagger and surges forward, driving it across Jon's neck. The two men stare at each other in surprise.
Sorry, Jon, but we serve different kings.
Suddenly, war horns sound from behind as the real Robert bursts from nearby woods, striking the disorganized Targaryen host as they are too busy surging forward. Although the Baratheons suffer heavier losses, the loss of a dragon sends the rebel forces wavering, and they are now forced to withdraw. Robert wishes to pursue as his men's spirits are raised by the death of Viserion, but as he organizes his forces, a rider approaches, this one from the north. The man is haggard, with his black cloak in tatters and blood spattered on his face, but his message cannot wait. The wall has fallen. While Ned had busily fortified the wall, Jon Snow tried to rescue the wildlings at Hardhome, but this proved to be a huge failure. Not only did the effort fail, but the Whites took control of the ships and sailed around the wall to strike at Eastwatch by the sea. This gave the White Walkers an opening to pour through the breach. The Night's Watch is doing everything to try and hold them off, but it's no use. They need the full might of the Seven Kingdom if they are to survive. Robert looks around the battlefield, taking in the carnage. This was already one of the bloodiest battles he'd ever fought, and yet he can't imagine the chaos that must be gripping the north. Part of him wants to send his army out, to crush these rebels as quickly as possible, and march to Ned's aid. But he knows there will be no time. There is only one solution. As the sun rises over the battlefield, Robert stands over the carnage, waiting to see if his message was received. Not long after, 3 figures ride out to join him: Renly, Daenerys, and young Griff.
The wall has fallen.
The air in the tent turns colder than the winds of the far north.
This isn't wildlings, though. It's something worse. The White Walkers. They're pouring south, and if we don't stop them, all this will be gone.
You expect us to believe in tales of ice demons and dead men? Stories told to frighten children?
A few years ago, there were no dragons either. Are you prepared to dismiss what I've seen with my own eyes? This isn't about the thrones anymore. It's about survival.
You expect us to abandon this war? All for the words of a single rider? You're madder than Ares.
No, he's acting like a king should.
Perhaps you should take some notes, pup.
I've already sent orders. Stannis will lift the siege at Harrenhal and march north to meet us. You can confirm with your eunuch or your pet sellsword. But while you're squabbling over a crown, I will fight for my people. They'll drown this land in ice and death.
And you would trust us with this? Why not crush us here and now, then march north unopposed? Robert lets out a bitter laugh.
You think I'd tell you this if it were a ruse? I'm a warrior boy. I'd like nothing more than to crush you. But what will I be fighting for? A graveyard?
If these creatures are as terrible as you say, then you have my dragons.
Fine. I suppose the world is worth saving. Very well then. I'll send word to my forces. In Winterfell, Ned Stark stands atop the battlements as thousands of whites batter against the gates, only stopped by a motley band of Northmen from different houses, the remnants of his army that tried to stop the dead. The castle is strong, but Ned knows it will not hold forever. The dead do not tire. Then, through the howling wind, a sound unlike any other cuts through the night. The first dragon bursts through the storm clouds, its fiery breath a streak of light in the darkness. Moments later, another follows. Fire burns through the ranks of the undead, allowing the combined host of the Seven Kingdoms to rush through. Northmen, Valemen, Dornishmen, Rivermen, Ironborn, Westermen, Stormlanders, Reachmen, Unsullied, and the Freedmen charge into the chaos. The dragons dive, unleashing torrents of flame that carve through the ranks of whites, turning the frozen battlefield into a blazing inferno. Using the knowledge given to them by the Night's Watch, they are armed with dragonglass weapons that carve through the whites. At the center of the chaos, Robert Baratheon fights like a man possessed, his warhammer swinging and crushing foes. His men rally behind him, emboldened by their king's fury.
Is that all you've got? Come on, you bloody corpses. You're not taking Winterfell.
Nearby, Daenerys rides Drogon, her silver hair streaming in the wind, thinning the dead's numbers. But even the might of the dragons is not enough to stem the tide entirely. Grey Worm and the Unsullied form an impenetrable shield wall, watching their flanks. Young Griff rides atop an elephant, barreling through the whites and advancing toward Winterfell with the Golden Company. In their flanks, Stannis and Renly command cavalry units and cut through the masses of undead. In the thick of melee, Robert spies a figure unlike the others. Tall, clad in icy armor, and wielding a blade that glows with frost. The Night King. Robert razors defiantly and swings his hammer against his chest. The Night King turns, meeting Robert's charge with an eerie calm, raising his chilling blade. Their weapons clash. The impact sends shockwaves across the battlefield. For once, Robert finds a foe stronger than him. Blow after blow rains down on Robert, and for the first time, the Stormlord is forced to retreat, blood seeping from wounds torn into his armor. Though Robert gets a blow in that cracks the Night King's chest plate, this barely slows him down, and a blow from the Night King sends Robert tumbling to the ground. The Night King raises his sword for the killing blow, but then, from the gates of Winterfell, a desperate cry rises. Young Griff whirls his elephant around, tossing whites aside as Jon Snow, Robb Stark, and Ned lead a final charge out of the castle. They smash into the rear of the undead horde, scattering the whites and drawing the Night King's attention away from Robert as Jon rushes up to the Night King and crosses swords with him, while Ned pulls Robert away and drags him to safety. Robert struggles to rise as Jon clashes with him, Longclaw humming as it connects with the sword. Although Jon fights with everything he's got, it's clear he is no match for the Night King, and he begins to back away. With the last surge of strength, Robert rushes forward and swings his hammer down at the Night King's knee, shattering it and sending it tumbling over. As he topples to the ground, Jon buries Longclaw into his throat. Suddenly, the dead all around them crumble apart as the Night King shatters into nothingness. By dawn, only the living remain standing. But the question of the Iron Throne remains. To everyone's surprise, Robert comes up with an answer. He shall step down as king. At first, no one can believe it, but he insists. He says the only reason he continued as king was to fix his mistakes. Now the best way he can do that is by appointing a worthy successor. After seeing Griff and Daenerys fighting side by side, he feels confident in their abilities. So, in the halls of Winterfell, surrounded by the great lords and ladies of the Seven Kingdoms, Robert renounces the crown and instead takes up a life of a sellsword. The Golden Company readily accepts Robert as the Captain General, while Griff and Daenerys are wed and made to rule as king and queen. Robert leaves the north with much fanfare. His bannermen and friends all tearfully cheer his name while Unsullied clash their spears. Even Stannis and Renly put aside their differences to wish their brother well. In the air, dragons roar and blow bursts of fire in salute. But the last person to say goodbye is Ned Stark. As Robert departs, the two exchange a few kind words and embrace before the former king sails off. Soon, the singers across the Seven Kingdoms sing of the Sellsword King and the Wandering Stag. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.